someone like Usagi.
Why do people from all over the world come to the University of Washington? They come here to find people.
I'm a big background character advocator, and so I was curious on who played with each other in the second selection. If you finished season 1 of the anime, or read up to chapter 93, you will see all 35 survivors. I want to figure out which of the survivors played against each other in the second selection. As we know, once you complete the 100 goals, you are prompted to move forward in teams of 3, and are ranked on the clear order. However, you only got your ranking after you enter in the team of 3. The ranking on the shirt would be set as a default value, which means there will be less number bias between the players when selecting their teammates. To survive the second selection, the players must have formed teams of 3, where winning their match would result in the surviving team picking up one of the losers. Once winning their matches and finalizing their team of 5, they would play against the 5 World Select players. To actually survive this arc, the players must form the team of 5 without getting eliminated, within a specific time frame. After playing against the World 5, they would assess whether the team would survive and proceed to the third selection, which leads to only 7 remaining teams. Well, we already see the perspective of characters through Isagi's journey, and so we can start there. Before jumping into the remaining 30 players, I want to mention 2 things. Firstly, I used some information from my first video talking about the initial 5 stratums and who played with each other. I used this to give reasoning for why some players may team up and play against each other. In that video, I proposed 3 potential options. I want to quickly mention that I think option 1 was actually more likely than 3, as I do think Kiora was the top scorer in his stratum. And honestly, I'm not sure why I selected the only option without Kiora in Nanase's stratum, but for the remainder of the video, I'll reference this option. Secondly, I'll talk about fodder characters quite a bit, who just fill the role as teamed up, but I didn't look too hard into these background characters. And since there are 125 survivors, there are too many possibilities to guess the specific randoms correctly, and so I'll only really focus on the survivors. I did give some ranks or randomly generated names to help identify the background characters. Characters like Rin and Shido are insanely good, and even in the third selection were tiers above the other survivors. And for them to not survive would require them to lose multiple times to fodders and other survivors, which I doubt since a lot of the other strong players were from Team V. And so the first thing we have to do is group the characters by their shoe colors. Characters like Rin and Shido are insanely good, and even in the third selection were tiers above times to fodders and other survivors, which I doubt since a lot of the other strong players were from Team V. And so the first thing we have to do is group the characters by their shoe color, and so we get something like this. But I do have to mention that there's a difference between the manga and anime, leading to mixed interpretations. Characters like Kiora have green W shoes in Season 1, a game, and even the manga, so it's fair to assume that he's a Team W player. But then there's characters like Saguma who had Team Z shoes in Season 1, but had Team W shoes in the manga in Season 2, and similarly someone like Ishikari and Tanaka have differing shoes between the two media too. And so for this video I intend to just use the manga colours and hope the Season 2 anime fixes their shoe colours. So onto the actual characters remaining to discuss. In the previous video the Stratum captains were Rin, Shido, Hiyori and Nanase, but this time I'm going to do it slightly different and use the top 6 as the Stratum captains, who are all Team V players. Rin and Shido seemed unfamiliar with each other, but both having Team V shoes, meaning they were from different Stratums. Whereas we know for a fact that Toya and Karasu were teammates in the first selection on Team V. And as we see from the Team A vs B match, it seemed like this was Rin and Shido's first interactions with Karasu and Toya, leading to the 3 different Stratum captains so far. Then finally we have Yukamiya. In the Team A vs C match, it seemed like it was his first time playing against Rin and Shido. He could still hypothetically be from a Toya and Karasu Stratum, but seeing as how he was ranked 23 in the second selection and didn't team up with them, who had higher numbers, then I'm leading to believe they were in different teams. There's a big emphasis in Karasu and Toya as a duo, and no mention as a trio. And the other reason is because when Ego talks about the top 6, he says it's their evaluation from the first selection, second selection and the World 5 match. So I think there's a good chance he picked the best from each stratum, meaning our stratums can be separated into Rins, Shidos, Karasu and Toyas, Yukamiyas and finally Nagi's. And so going back to the remaining characters, we can cross off the stratum captains. And now the next character I want to discuss is Hiyori, as this guy single-handedly causes the most confusion. Something to note is that in both seasons of the anime, in the game, and even in the manga, he has black Team V shoes. And so you'd think he'd be a Team V player, but in his backstory he was given rank 291, which places him in Team Z. So which one is it? Well, the artist is kind of bad with numbers and makes a lot of mistakes. In the third selection he gave Endoji and Sentetsu the same number. For a brief time Ishikari was given rank 25 before being fixed to 13, and even the jersey numbers were wrong in the NEL. And so it could be a genuine mistake or actually intentional. Judging by his introduction to Shido and Rin, I'm less likely to believe he was from their stratums. As for the other two, Karasu's stratum is definitely a possibility whether it's Team V or Z, as we see characters with previous relationships such as Isiki and Kira, Ryo and Naoki, and the one of my bros with Chigiri end up in the same stratums. But instead I actually think he is from Yukamiya's. And this is simply because in chapter 39, when all the teams were gathering together, we see 2 of Hiyori's teammates also there. And so I'm inclined to believe Hiyori survived on a team and was not a sole survivor. But there's a big issue with this. If Hiyori's team survived as a Team Z, that would mean the remaining stratums include a Team W, X, Y and Z, which seems fine on paper. But if you think about Nanase, he's the only other character with Ikiguri to be stated as bad and lacking skill, which is why his growth in the NEL is so amazing. Since Hiyori and Nanase didn't know each other previously, and how I mentioned Nanase probably needs a teammate to survive, like Tsunsaki and Endoji, then that would mean of the 8 surviving teams, 5 of them were not Team V. Which would mean that one of Rin, Shido and Yukamiya would have to end up as a sole survivor, which sounds so off as I mentioned earlier, as it would require them to lose multiple times. Which is why I think there's a good chance it was actually an error and from Team V instead. We see 6 people in Karasu's team and 7 in Hiyori's, so if they were unique people on the same team, then we would have 13 people, which is too many. I do want to say there is a guy in the back with black hair who could be someone from Karasu's team, making it 12, which is a valid number, and if this was true we would have their complete team. but I think it's more likely he was from another stratum and on Yukimiya's team. We can't discard the other people entering the room with Hiyori's teammates, because they were from the same stratum too. We see both Ayu and Tanaka, who are Team V players, standing around his teammates, which would not be possible if Hiyori was in Karasu's team. And another potential issue is that Rin, Ayu and Tokomitsu were in separate stratums. And so if we knew all 11 people in Karasu and Hiyori's team, then Ayu and Tokomitsu must be in the other 2 remaining stratums, and it would require a lot of changes in the teams. And so overall, I think it's very likely that Hiyori is from Yukimiya's stratum and team. With another character down, I may as well continue with my other confident predictions, and that is the duo Ayu and Tokomitsu. When Rin, Ayu and Toki formed the team, it was confirmed that those 3 had no direct relationship prior to meeting each other, meaning those 2 must be in different teams of the 3 remaining stratums. I just mentioned in Hiyori's section that his teammate resembled someone next to Ayu, and so I'd wager he was in Yukimiya's team too. But the other reason is about a character's theme and dynamics with teammates. For example, in a spin-off, which stratum would make most sense for these characters? Personally, sticking Ayu in the same team as Yukimiya, who is known to be a model and truly glam, makes perfect sense, as their dynamic enables the characters to bounce off each other. Then for Tokomitsu, the best dynamic between either option would be Shido's stratum, as you have this hyper-violent character with an anxiety-ridden scaredy cat who is physically insane. Like if there was a spin-off episode Shido, then he would be the best and most entertaining partner that could be assigned together. So I do believe that Tokomitsu was on Shido's team and Ayu and Yukimiya's, as they are both plausible options with the best potential dynamics. And now that we have 2 more characters crossed off, the next to note about him is that in the anime he is Team W shoes, while in the manga's Team A vs Team C match, he is Team V. In Season 2, his shoes may get updated to the correct colour, but either way I'm pretty sure he was part of Yukimiya's stratum. Similar to Hiyori and Ayu, we saw him stand around their proposed teammates. Although Tanaka was fodder, we have a bit of characterization from him where we know his character theme and portrayal is more of a gross person. And once again, I want to bring up character dynamics as I think it works extremely well with Ayu and Yukimiya. On one side you have this glam beauty, and on the other this gross beast with negative glam. And so overall it seems like Yukimiya's stratum is the most likely, and it doesn't really matter if he is a Team W or Team V player, he should at least be there. Back to the remaining characters, and I want to continue with another Team V player, Hiroki. Now in the anime he had Team X shoes, while in episode Nagi in his proper introduction had Team V shoes, so it could be either one. We know he had his phone implying he scored at least 3 goals and traded in for it, and for what we've seen in the spin-off he is really good, so it's believable he could be a sole survivor for Team X, or he just does extremely well on Team V. If he was a Team V player, then you have to consider his second selection. Hiroki was ranked 22 and he formed a team with Nico and Sentetsu, but Hiroki's philosophy is about rationality. So if he was teammates with Otoya or Karasu, then the rational play would be to form a trio, but he didn't. The same goes for Hiyori, Tanaka or even Yukimiya. All those people had an opportunity for him to team up with, but he chose Nico and Sentetsu. So in my eyes, he is from one of the other 2 stratums. In Rin's case, he formed the team instantly, and so Hiroki may have been ditched by his only other competent player. That's why he looked for 2 new members. Similarly, Tokomitsu was forced into a team by Rin and Ayu, and so if Hiroki finished, he wouldn't be able to team up with him, and Shido is well Shido, so he may not want to team up with him, or he formed the team before Shido completed his test. So he could be from either stratum, but I'd favour him being from Rin's. I don't think he really fits the dynamic of Tokomitsu and Shido, and I think sticking the player that is a hybrid of Isuki and Nagi as Rin's teammate makes more sense, as they were the ones to confront him most in the story. Characters, I want to talk about Ishikari and Nishioka. In both the anime and manga, we know Nishioka got injured, so we never got to see his shoes specifically, whereas we see Ishikari being a Team V player in the anime or Team X in the manga. I partnered these 2 up because we see them standing next to each other with the bald-headed guy in the top 15, and we also see some of the other people standing with them, who could be teammates or part of their stratum, but I'm fairly certain that this was the Team X that survived. In Karasu's backstory, we see them play against Team X and no one else from that match is seen in the second selection, so they won't be in that stratum. As for the other three, it's a bit harder to guess. We only see a portion of Hiri's team, but the other people standing there are likely from that stratum too, meaning there'd be too many survivors for Nishioka's team. And so I'm thinking Nishioka's team is either from Rin or Shido stratum. We do see Tokumitsu call him by his title, but that doesn't say much about their relationship. I do want to mention when Kunigami and Ryo are talking to the other 2v2 losers, we have one person say that he was from Shirashi and look like Nishioka's teammates, where the black-haired bun guy could be him. The only issue is at the same time, we have Ayu and Tokumitsu asking teams for a match, and we see a character with a similar design. And so it's a 50-50 if it's him, but I think there's a chance they were from Shido's stratum.
Co-pilot, make a quiz for my astronomy notes.
You got it!
So the next character I want to talk about is Himizu. The anime never actually had a shoe color, and so it was a random guess last time. But with the spin-off, here's a bit of a weird one, since his introduction had him as a Team X, changed him to a Team Z the following chapter, and then reverted him back to a Team X the following. So it could be either one, but seeing as how he has white shoes more often, I'll interpret it as that's his team. Since we already know Team X, then I'm fairly certain he was the sole survivor. We know he was partnered with Karasu and Otoya, two known strong players, and he seems to get along with them well. And so if I had a guess, I'd pick Karasu's stratum, but a sole survivor is a bit harder to predict. Now the next character I want to talk about is Nanase. I mentioned earlier that he's one of the few characters to be called out for lacking skill, so I think his chance of being a sole survivor are low, just like how I think Igaguri surviving by himself is low. He is the Team C player, and judging by his interactions with the other third selection members, he didn't know them. But since he is on a different team, it's excusable if they haven't properly met yet, and wouldn't necessarily be a retcon. But I still believe he survived on a team, and my hunch is telling me Karasu's stratum. The only other two Team C players are Ondoji and Tsunzaki, seeing as Suguma's shoes were changed. Then I believe they were his teammates in the first and second selection. Tsunzaki and Ondoji are the pair of players that are always together, whether it be getting food, standing together, or talking before the NEL. They seem to be one of the closest relationships, and them being teammates makes sense, especially since they survived the second selection together. And so I'm guessing this trio were a team, and they were from Karasu's stratum. However, I do want to mention that Ondoji's shoes aren't actually confirmed to be Team Z in the anime, but we do see a manga snippet where his shoes do seem to resemble them the most. And so I do still believe he was a Team Z member, and the three of them survived on a team, and likely in Karasu's stratum. With three more characters down, I do want to talk about the next one, Kiora. As we know, he is a Team W player, but a question now is whether he is a sole survivor or survived on a team. We know his philosophy is about surviving on the borderline, and to me that means he barely survived the first selection. He calls his teammates in order to survive the borderline. But on the other hand, it could mean just like how Isugi's team survived, that Kiora won his final game against Team Y and his team barely survived thanks to him, as his presence determines the VIX with his character theme. If he did survive on a team, then I believe he didn't have any of the other Team W survivors, and as for a stratum, it's a bit harder to guess, since he could really go in any of them. Like he could play against Shido and Tokumitsu and lean into the provoking aspect of his character, or he could be from Karasu's stratum, which could prompt their 3v3, or even in Yukamiya's stratum, where he could potentially be tied as the top scorer. And if I had to guess, I would say he was in the 4th stratum and survived on Team W. And while we're talking about Team W, we may as well talk about the other two Team W survivors, Suguma and Saramadara. As for Suguma, we know his shoes were updated to match the manga, and we know they didn't know each other coming into the 3rd selection, so they should be in separate stratums. But something to note is that in episode Nagi, both characters were highlighted to be top prospects coming into Blue Lock, and so it's believable they could be sole survivors despite their performance in the 3rd selection. And in this Team A vs B match, we see Karasu and Otoya be very dismissive to their talents, and so I'm leading away from them being from their stratum. For Saramadara, we know his character associates with waves and surfing, and so I think thematically the best stratum for him is Rin's, since his character is also about water. And then for Suguma, I'll guess he is from neither Kiora nor Saramadara's stratum, and I'm guessing he is from Shido's as a sole survivor for Team W. But I still want to reiterate that sole survivors are a bit harder to guess as they are pretty flexible in where they go. So the next characters to talk about are the Team Y players, Corona, Haiji and Sakura. Now we know at least one Team Y survives, so at least one of them should hypothetically be on the surviving team. In my previous video about who beat Baro and Nishioka, one of the proposed options was the trio of Yukimiya, Haiji and Sakura, and if that's true then I'm inclined to believe they were the duo in Team Y, and given my predictions the only stratum without two teams already would be wrld. But before jumping to Corona, I want to talk about the rest of the team. As we know, when the teams were walking in, we saw a bunch of background characters and we see a team with a character that looks like Yuzu but taller and hair reversed. And we see him stand next to the guy in the loser's gate and another player with a Team Y emblem and not the highest number. So potentially this group of people are part of Team Y too, or at least part of the stratum where a Team Y survived. He has the second highest number, which could mean only one of the Team Y survivors were in that team, but since it's something the author likely didn't think of at this point, I wouldn't look too deep into it. But I'll still put them in the same stratum and predicting that Haiji and Sakura were the teammates in Team Y. As for the final Team Y player, we have Corona, who I believe was just a sole survivor. As for a stratum, it's a bit hard to guess as we don't really see him interact with anyone, so he could realistically go anywhere. Maybe he was in Shido's stratum and that's why they play against each other in the second selection. Or alternatively, I think he could be in the same stratum as Kiora and we have the final Team W vs Team Y game decide which team survives, which would be Kiora's. And with character, and that is Yuzu. He is the Team X player and so I'm guessing he isn't from Nishioka's team and was the sole survivor instead. This would leave only the other two remaining stratums to be available. Now I do briefly want to talk about my headcanon prediction where I'm guessing that Yuzu is the younger brother of the person I mentioned before and isn't wrld's stratum, as I think having a younger and older brother dynamic being observed from wrld's perspective could be an interesting side story. Now altogether it would look like something like this, or at least that is my prediction, where Hiyori was in Yukimiya's team. Now there could be variations like Hiyori being a Team Z player and looking like this, or even in Karasu's stratum which would look like this. Perspective could be an interesting side story. Now altogether it would look like something like this, or at least that is my prediction, where Hiyori was in Yukimiya's team. Now there could be variations like Hiyori being a Team Z player and looking like this, or even in Karasu's stratum which would look like this. But like I said at the beginning of the video, I do want to do this properly, and so that involves looking at all 125 survivors. So I've made little icons and reasonably found around 100 or so characters for the remaining fodder teammates. We know the original 25 from Isugi's stratum. As for Yukimiya's, it consists of people from Hiyori's proposed team, as well as the people standing around Tanaka and Ayu. We can have the guy who was paired up with a bushy hair guy also from Hiyori's team, and then have the surviving Team W include Kiora and the two people from the top 15. The two people highlighted at the bottom who we also see in chapter 1 can be the remaining two sole survivors, and the final third one can be Corona. Then as a story we have Team V stomp every game, and we have Team W and Y both go 2-1 defeating the fodder teams before their final game, where we have Kiora barely defeat Corona's team and he survives the borderline with his team. As for Karasu's stratum, I'm guessing it would be from Nanase's perspective, where we could have Himizu be the Baro of Team X, and have Nanase in the position where he can either pass the Sunzaki, who is Raiji, or Indoji, who is Kunigami. For wrld's stratum, we can have the first game be against Yuzu's brother, or have him on his team, and with Haiji and Sakura, they probably have an okay showing in their first Team Y game. Then they can have the Saramadara match against wrld, which goes exactly how you expect, and finally we have the Team X game against Yuzu. wrld will still win, but it will be more of a mental battle than a physical challenge. And then finally the Team Z game will just have him deal with his internal thoughts. Then the most fun stratum would be Shido's. We have the game of tag where maybe Togamitsu tries to eliminate him, but in the last second Shido eliminates someone else, something Kiora couldn't do. Then his match starts with him being excited and having fun in the Team Y match as he teams up with Toki. The Team W match against Tsuguma could continue his excitement, especially against a powerhouse player similar to Kunigami. and then they go on to face Nishioka's undefeated team, determine if they get first place, and it ends with an extremely close match. Then finally the Team Z match has him deal with his boredom as no one sparks anything on that team. And with that, my predictions are done, and thanks for watching. And as always, Buddha be praised, take care and have a good day.
Kick off the summer season and shop the Memorial Day outdoor event with At Home.
In the
Blue Lock
all-new
characters we haven't
Human
seen yet, Part 1. In Blue Lock, we're introduced to so many different characters and rivals that some characters get shafted or get no screen time in the show. Even if they have one of the coolest designs we've seen, some characters haven't gotten any spotlight despite surviving the second selection or being noticed at the start of the series. However, the most popular of the bunch and the biggest mystery in Blue Lock has to be Hajime Nishioka, or Aomori's Messi. His first appearance was in the first chapter and episode of the series, in the waiting room, and is recognized by players like Kira, Reo, and Tokimitsu. With a name like Aomori's Messi, your expectations would be pretty high for him, especially since he was name dropped at the start of the show, but we haven't seen him play a single game. The only information we know about him was that he cleared the second selection with Nico, Hiyori, and Ishikari, a player we also saw at the start of the series. He was also injured in the World 5 game when they played against them, and that's it. Some people say that he's a gag character, and some the series. He was also injured in the World 5 game when they played against them, and that's it. Some people say that he's a gag we also saw at the start of the series. He was also injured in the World 5 game when they played against the series. And Ishikari, a player we also saw at the start of the series. He was also injured in the World 5 game when they played against—
Hey buddy! Squidward! Free cleaning service? Census taker? Good day, kind sir. Would you like to buy some Gill Scout cookies? Hey buddy!
You can ask the flower.
When real lime juice meets sea salt, a classic.
the background characters, but they are just placeholders. For example, others are just the remaining numbers in the top 14. Like Nishioka's teammate, I refer to him as rank 12, but he could realistically be rank 8, 9, 11, 12 or 14. With that being said, I can delve into the remaining 30 survivors and my prediction on how the second selection completely went down. Since we follow Isugi and know his team were the first clear team, we know every other team finishes after him, and so we can use his journey to map the completion order. There is no wait time for the initial 3v3, and so let's call the first day, Day 1. As soon as the trio teamed up, they instantly decide to battle Reen's team, where they lose and Batra gets picked up. After losing, they enter the loser's gate, and very soon after, Baro and Narahaya enter, implying they lost at a similar pace as Isugi's team. Teams cannot rush once in the loser's gate, and must wait a full 24 hours until their next match, and so we can denote that the 2v2 happens on Day 2. On that day, we see Baro get picked up and Narahaya get eliminated. We then see the trio rest for the remainder of the day. On Day 3, we see them head to the public baths, where they intend to play against Ryo, Kunigami and Shigiri, where we know it takes another full 24 hours before the next match. And so Day 4 morning is when they play their 3v3. After winning the 3v3 and picking up Shigiri, we see Isugi talk to Reen and Batra and decide to play their 4v4. After another 24 hours and on the 5th day is when the 4v4 happens, and after losing and getting picked up by Reen's team, they complete the second selection. Now that we've established a timeline, I can focus on the other characters and their matches. The first trio we are introduced to are Narahaya, Baro and Nishioka. On a side note, since the teams of 3 are usually with players they're familiar with, then you may have wondered, why did they team up? I guess that Narahaya would just ask to team up with Baru and willingly be his servant, with Baru not caring who he played with or against. But Nishioka is a weird one because he wasn't part of the OG stratum, so why would he join? Well, I'm guessing it's because Nishioka and Baru knew each other prior to Blue Lock. Nishioka is portrayed as Aomori's Messi and implies he was the best player in that prefecture, and we know that Baru played for Akudo Academy. With a quick search on Google Maps, you realize that Akudo is located in Aomori too, and so I'm assuming they had previous history. So who actually beat these three? Well, Nishioka was likely one of the best players in his stratum, and Baru was the top scorer too. Those two have the ability to beat any fodder team by skill alone, and so I'm inclined to believe they lost to some of the other 35 survivors. Since they entered the loser section almost at the same time as Izuki, and Chigiri's comment to Kunigami that they haven't seen anyone yet makes me comfortable guessing that Baru's team entered and played against another team with members ranked below 40. If we look at the survivors in this range, there's a few options. I don't think it was Yuki, Otoya or Hiyori for reasons I'll explain later, but what about the other survivors? Well, we know in chapter 44 that Ishikari, Tanaka and Corona didn't form a team yet, and so we can rule them out, as well as the top 15 members besides the bald-headed guy from Nishioka's original team. We also know in the spin-off chapter that both Sakura and Hiragi were standing around Rio right before Chigiri and Kunigami approached him, meaning they wouldn't have formed a team with other top 40 members yet, and so that leaves two potential survivors, Kiora or Haiji. Well, I think it was both, with Kiora gaining importance in the main story and his portrayal in the spin-off novel as potentially the top scorer in his stratum, which we also learned recently that he has one of the highest shooting stats in the NEL arc. I think there's a good chance Kiora played against Baru's team. If Kiora and Baru were top scorers, and with Haiji and Nishioka being survivors of potentially similar levels, as we see in the third selection they stomped 5-2 on the same team, however neither making the U20 bench, then it's believable they could defeat Baru's team in a close 4-5 match. As for the third member, I initially thought it would be Sakura, so they could be ranked 19, 20 and 21, but since we see in episode Nagi that it's unlikely him, then I think it would be the bald-headed guy who was in Nishioka's previous team, or a fodder character like Narahaya, like the ranked 31 player we see in the anime, even though the guy with Kyora's jersey number doesn't look like him. And if you watch my first video of who played with each other in the first selection, you'll also realize that I predicted Kiora, Nishioka and Haiji being from the same stratum, which gives actual reason for Baru's team to play against Kyora's. The next teams I want to discuss are Karasu's and Nico's teams. In my first video, I concluded that it's likely that Ayu, Yuki, Otoya, Karasu and Hiyori were teammates in the first selection. With Ayu joining Rin, that leaves 4 of them remaining. Since they need teams of 3, then someone will have to miss out or they have to team up in pairs of 2. I believe that Otoya, Hiyori and Yuki finished before Karasu and decided to wait for him as he was the heart of the team in the first selection. Before Karasu as rank 69 enters, we see rank 63 Nico ask rank 53 Zentetsu to team up. What we also know is that Nico wants to team up with someone easy to communicate with, which fits Hiyori's description. My headcanon is that once Karasu enters, the 4 discuss their options, and we see Nico overhear the discussion and offer Hiyori to join his team, which he accepts, and with that we have 2 more teams being Nico, Zentetsu and Hiyori, as well as Karasu, Otoya and Yuki. I believe that Nico, Hiyori and Zentetsu sharpen their strength the first few days, until they see Nagi, Baru and Chigiri drop. As a result, we see them offer to play against each other. Since we know Zentetsu joins Nagi's team eventually as their 4th member, I believe there's a good chance this 3v3 happened, with Nagi's team winning and picking up Zentetsu, with Hiyori and Nico losing and dropping down to the losers gate. Now, they offer to play against Kyora's team that defeated Baru originally. After Nagi's team win, Kyora gets picked up as their 5th member, with the remaining 3 getting relegated back down. And with that being said, the second clear team is complete. With the third clear team being so stacked, I believe there's a good chance that they finished 3rd because no team was willing to play against them, seeing as how above they were compared to the other Blue Lock players at that moment. I'm guessing that they were the most dominant team in the first selection over all 5 stratums, and maybe rumors spread deterring teams from playing against them. I'm guessing they won both their 4th and 5th respectively. I'm guessing that Yuzu, Sakura and a random 3rd member teamed up in the 2nd selection. We see them E together with Corona, but since Corona is actually good, I don't see Yuzu getting picked over him. And so I don't think they were an original trio, but it was just Yuzu and Sakura. Since they weren't part of Karasu's original stratum, I think it also gives reason for them to select them in their 3rd selection if they lost to them in their 3v3. I think Himizu had a fodder team. We know he played with rank 115 at a point, but that doesn't tell his full journey. For example, he could win, lose, win, or just a singular win to get a team of 4. Since he was a survivor and selected as their 5th member, I'm guessing it's likely he didn't have any other notable Blue Lock survivors, and just proceeded to lose against Karasu's team, with his other 3 fodder teammates getting eventually eliminated. And so the 3rd clear team is now accounted for.
How does payroll feel with Deal?
So let's talk about the 4th clear team who personally have the best designs. I'm a firm believer that Nanase and Doji and Sunzaki were teammates in the 1st selection and formed the trio. I have more reason explained in my other video, but I think they were the 2nd team Z to survive. That being said, I think those 3 will play against Haichi, Nishioka and their fodder teammate. With them being from the same stratum, may give reason for them to play against each other. Once Narase's team win, I think they'll select Haichi with Nishioka and fodder dropping down. And that's mainly because if they picked up Nishioka here, then that would mean that Nanase and Hiyori would have to eventually play against each other for Nigo's team to pick him up. And since Nanase and Hiyori seemed unfamiliar with each other in their 3rd selection, then I think it's more likely that Haichi got selected. That would mean that Hiragi was the 5th to join the team. We know that Hiragi still didn't have a team once Kunigami walked in, and we do see his teammate ranked 62, and so I'm guessing his original 3 had fairly high numbers. His other 2 members I'm guessing are the sole survivors from the proposed stratum, as they have more prominent designs and didn't see them in the top 50. And so the 4th clear team is complete. Back to Nico's team, and we see they're in the 2v2 losers section, implying that one of Saramadara, Ishikari or Nishioka must have dropped too. As I said before, I think that Haiji was selected over Nishioka, and already in a 2v2 situation, and so it's easy for Nishioka to join as their 3rd member. Of course, there are many combinations like Saramadara being selected in the 2v2, with Ishikari and Nishioka joining later, but for convenience sake, let's just say Nishi got picked up 3rd. As Ishikari and Nishioka were previous teammates, I'm guessing they convinced their teams to play against each other. With 125 survivors, I'm guessing that Saramadara had no affiliation with any other Blue Lock survivor, and his team just lost with him joining Nico's team eventually. As the 5th clear team, any of the 3 could join in any order, but I think it's unlikely that Ishikari or Saramadara had interactions with any. As for the 6th clear team, we know that Raichi, Gagamaru and Wanama formed the trio originally, and ended up together, so I think it's fair to assume they won both matches. I'm assuming that Tanaka's team was their first 3v3 match, where I think his team were the other Team W players he survived with in the 1st selection. Then with Shiguma, I think he had 3 random teammates, especially if he was the sole survivor previously. They could join in either order, but I think Tanaka being their 4th member is more likely since he seems closer with Gakamaru and Wanama. The 7th and final team we know persisted of Shido and Ikiguri, introducing the 2v2 Losers Gate, where we know they lost their first game because Shido got red carded since he got bored and no one made him feel anything. So I'm guessing their teammate was a random high number fodder character, and they also lost to another random team of fodders. After that, we see the 2v2 against Ryo and Kunigami, where we see Shido win and pick up Ryo. As mentioned before, I think Sakura was dropped to the Losers Gate, and so he must have won off screen to eventually be picked up from Shido's team. But since Sakura was on the 7th clear team, that means he couldn't play with any other survivor. Lastly, Corona. I'm guessing had no one relevant on his journey either. We don't see him team up with anyone by the time Kunigami walks in, and his fate is hard to guess since a lot of top players already got picked up and he finished fairly late. I think it's likely that Shido played with one of Sakura or Corona and potentially both in the 1st selection, which may incite them to play their match against each other. And with that being said, I finished all my guesses on all 35 characters and their teams. With 125 survivors in the first selection, I'm bound to get some characters wrong, especially since most of this relies on Kiora and Haiji being the ones to defeat Baru's original team. There may be other combinations like Sakura or Hiraki being in the original trio, but for now, I'll conclude my theory until we see more information from future episode Nagi chapters.
Every
With
eye
that being
type
said,
explained in Blue Lock Part 1. There are 6 types of eyes in Blue Lock.
Alright, babe, have fun. I'm honestly just gonna be here all night.
What was a loophole that you found and exploded the hell out of? My college dorm had this ridiculous rule where guests couldn't stay overnight more than twice a month. 3 violations meant losing housing completely. My girlfriend Ava and I had been dating for 2 years, but now lived in different dorms across campus. Seeing each other just 8 nights a month was torture. Our floor's RA, Trevor, was basically a hall monitor on steroids. This dude would literally wake up at 5:30 a.m. to catch overnight guests trying to sneak out. He kept a physical logbook of violations and had already gotten 2 students kicked out of housing that semester. Everyone hated him, but everyone feared him more. After he wrote me up for having Ava over a 3rd night in October, he smiled and said, "One more strike and you're homeless, buddy." I was desperate. That night, instead of studying for midterms, I did something no college student ever does. I actually read my housing contract, all 30 mind-numbing pages of it. At 2 a.m., bleary-eyed and caffeinated, I found gold buried on page 17. For purposes of overnight regulations, guests are defined as non-university individuals visiting residence facilities. I almost fell out of my chair. The definition specifically referred to people who weren't university students, but Ava was a student, just in a different building. By their own definition, she wasn't a guest at all. That weekend, I set the trap. Ava stayed Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I even made sure people saw her coming and going. Monday morning, right on schedule, Trevor pounded on my door at 6:15 a.m. He didn't even try to hide his satisfaction. 3 overnight guests in 1 weekend. That's your final strike. He was already writing on his clipboard. "You'll need to appear before the housing board next Monday to explain why you shouldn't be evicted." I yawned dramatically, then pulled out my highlighted contract. Actually, there have been 0 violations of the guest policy this entire semester. His pen froze mid-stroke. "What? She was here 3 nights in a row. Multiple witnesses confirmed it." "Oh, Ava was definitely here," I said, flipping to the highlighted section. "But according to this, a guest is defined as a non-university individual. Ava's a student with an active ID. She can't be a guest under your own rules." The color drained from his face as he read the section. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. This isn't," he sputtered. "Isn't what? The official housing contract we all signed?" I smiled. "Would you like to see her student ID as well?" He stormed off without another word. 2 days later, every resident received an urgent email from Housing Director Monica Wells announcing an immediate clarification to the guest policy, specifically adding that students from other residence halls are considered guests. I was prepared for this. That same night, I found another privileges cannot be implemented mid-term. The next morning, I knocked on Director Wells' open office door, highlighted contract in hand. Her eyes narrowed the moment she saw me. I placed the document on her desk, both sections highlighted. "According to page 23, you can't change it until next semester." She studied the pages, then looked up with a mixture of annoyance and respect. 5 years as director, and no one's ever actually read this thing, she sighed. "Congratulations, you found a legitimate loophole." Trevor became obsessed with finding ways to bust me on other violations. One night he wrote me up for excessive noise because my pencil was tapping too loudly while I studied. Another time for unauthorized furniture arrangement because my desk was 6 inches from its original position. Director Wells tried a different approach. She offered me a coveted single room in the upperclassmen dorm with a private bathroom if I'd voluntarily sign a new housing agreement. When I declined, she doubled it with a meal plan upgrade. The desperation was delicious. During move-out, Director Wells handed me next year's contract personally. The new guest definition was highlighted in neon yellow with a sticky note. Checkmate. By sophomore year, Ava and I both managed to get rooms in the same co-ed dorm. Different floors, but no overnight restrictions between them. What was a loophole that you found and exploded the hell out of? My college dorm...
Don't tell your brother that we got McDonald's french fries, okay?
Okay.
Uh-huh. Hey, bud, how was school?
We got McDonald's.
Kids in 10 years, what's the scariest thing you can...
This time for Africa.
The goal is to get the max amount of rings from every sport, and we just did it with the NFL. Okay, catch is, we get 20 respins, but we can use them wherever we want, so we don't have to use any on the NFL. That is actually very clutch. Any more? No, that would have been crazy if we did. Okay, MLB, this is 3 down the drain. 3 respins, nothing. Come on, 3 more. 6 total. Nope. Okay, this is 9. We're obviously looking for the Yankees with the MLB. Nope, nothing there. This is 12. NBA, we're looking for the Celtics. Nothing. This is 15 right here. Jeez. If we don't get one here, we lose. We've used up 18 respins, and unfortunately, the Celtics have the most NBA titles. Obviously, we lose since the Celtics is... Oh, come on! We would have had 3 out of 4. Well, actually, no. The Celtics have the most NBA, so we would have lost anyway. The goal is to get the max amount of...
That was rude.
Freeze it there.
All the time, but baby, you on my mind, and I don't know why, but the feeling is fine. Can't you see, you're hurting, you are for me. Oh, we were meant to be. All the time, but baby, you on my mind, and I don't know why, but the feeling is fine. You're hurting, you are for me. Oh, we were meant to be. All the time, but baby, you want my, but the feeling is fine. Can't you see? You're hurting, you are for me. Oh, we were meant to be.
Hey son, I'm firing up GTA.
Wait, Dad, stop! That's not for you!
Why? You've been playing this game every day for months. I want to give it a try.
Dad, it's just a racing game.
Why is there half-naked women on the loading screen then?
Women? Loading screen? I have no idea about any of that. This is so weird.
Son, you lied to me. You're grounded. Go study. You're not allowed to play GTA until you're old enough.
But Dad, I just wanted to play the races.
I don't care.
Fine, I'll go study.
Son, why is your father so mad at you? He told me he grounded you.
I forgot to polish his work shoes. So he told me to study, but I forgot my password for the school website. Can you help me? It's